There is a truth, a dangerous truth, a truth so simple that most people ignore it for their entire lives. And because they ignore it, they remain exactly where they are, waiting, hoping, doubting. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack opportunity, but because they lack something far more powerful, a force that Napoleon Hill called the beginning of all achievement, a force so intense that without it, even the greatest dreams decay into nothing. Burning desire, not a wish, not a hope, not a maybe someday, but a fire that refuses to die. Napoleon Hill spent over 20 years studying the most powerful minds of his time. Men who built empires from nothing, men who turned imagination into industries, men who bent reality through belief. And after decades of study, after interviewing legends, after decoding the psychology of success, he discovered something that shattered illusion. Most people never achieve wealth because they never truly decide that they must. They say they want success, but their actions whisper something else. They say they want freedom, but they negotiate with comfort. They say they want wealth, but they fear the price it demands. And so they live in contradiction. And contradiction kills destiny. Because the universe does not respond to what you casually want, it responds to what you are willing to burn for. There is a difference between interest and obsession. Interest says, if it works, great. Obsession says, it must work, or I will find another way until it does. Interest waits for the right time. Obsession creates the time. Interest looks for shortcuts. Obsession becomes the path. And this is where most people fail. They never cross that invisible line, the line between wishing and deciding. Napoleon Hill called it definiteness of purpose, a moment where the mind stops wandering and locks onto a single vision with absolute certainty. But most people never reach that moment because it requires something terrifying, commitment without guarantee. It demands that you believe before you see. It demands that you act before you feel ready. It demands that you persist, even when reality shows you nothing in return, and the average mind rejects this. Because the average mind is addicted to safety. It wants proof before action. It wants certainty before movement. It wants reward before sacrifice. But wealth, success, mastery, they do not operate under those rules. They respond to faith, not blind faith, but disciplined belief. The kind of belief Napoleon Hill described as a state of mind, a mental condition, that you train, that you repeat, that you build, until it becomes unshakable. Because here is the truth most people will never accept. Your subconscious mind does not respond to logic. It responds to emotion, repetition, and belief. And if your desire is weak, your belief will collapse under pressure. If your desire is uncertain, your actions will become inconsistent. If your desire is negotiable, your results will always be average. This is why most people start, but never finish. They begin with excitement, but fade with resistance, because they never transform their desire into something deeper, something dangerous, something unstoppable. Napoleon Hill warned about this. He said, a burning desire is the starting point of all achievement. Not talent, not education, not luck, desire, but not the kind that flickers, the kind that consumes, the kind that rewires your identity, the kind that makes quitting feel more painful than continuing. And here's where everything changes. Because when desire reaches that level, you stop asking, can I do this? And you start declaring, this will happen. No matter the cost, no matter the delay, no matter the obstacles. And suddenly the mind begins to operate differently. It becomes focused, relentless, creative, obsessed with solutions, because the brain, when given a definite purpose, becomes a problem-solving machine. It begins to attract ideas. It begins to notice opportunities. It begins to connect dots that were always there, but invisible to the undecided mind. This is what Hill meant when he said, "What the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." But most people misunderstand this. They think it's about positive thinking. It's not. It's about controlled thinking, directed thinking, persistent thinking. It's about dominating your mental environment until doubt has no space to exist. Because doubt is the silent destroyer of wealth. It whispers, maybe this won't work. Maybe you're not enough. Maybe it's too late. And if your desire is weak, you will listen. You will slow down. You will hesitate. You will quit. But when desire is burning, doubt becomes irrelevant. Fear becomes background noise. Failure becomes feedback. And time becomes an ally. This is the transformation Napoleon Hill witnessed again and again. Men who started with nothing, but possessed one thing stronger than circumstance: an unshakable desire, a vision so clear that reality had no choice but to adjust. But understand this clearly: desire alone is not enough. It must be organized, directed, reinforced. This is where autosuggestion enters, the deliberate act of programming your subconscious mind. Not once, not occasionally, but daily, relentlessly. Because your mind is always listening, every thought, every word, every belief becomes a command. And most people are unknowingly programming themselves for failure. They repeat limitation. They rehearse fear. They affirm doubt. And then they wonder why nothing changes. Napoleon Hill discovered something profound. The subconscious mind does not question, it accepts. So if you feed it weakness, it will create weakness. If you feed it certainty, it will create certainty. And this is where the rare individual separates from the average. They take control. They become intentional. They speak to themselves with authority. They visualize success with emotion. They repeat their purpose until it becomes identity. Because wealth is not created outside first, it is created within. And only then does it manifest externally. But there is another reason most people fail, a deeper reason, a more dangerous reason. They try to do it alone. Napoleon Hill called this the missing link for many, the mastermind principle. The idea that no great achievement is ever created in isolation, that when two or more minds unite in harmony toward a definite purpose, a third mind is formed, a higher intelligence, a creative force, a power that multiplies results. But ego prevents most people from accessing this. They isolate themselves, they hide their vision, they fear judgment, and in doing so, they limit their potential. Because no matter how strong your desire is, if your environment is weak, your progress will slow. If your circle is negative, your belief will be tested. If your surroundings are average, your standards will drop. This is why Napoleon Hill emphasized association, because success is contagious, and so is failure. And whether you realize it or not, you are always being influenced by what you hear, by what you see, by who you spend time with. So the question becomes, are you feeding your desire or starving it? Are you reinforcing belief or strengthening doubt? Are you moving with purpose or drifting with comfort? Because every day you are choosing, not with words, but with actions. And those actions are shaping your future right now. In this moment, there are two paths in front of you. One is easy, comfortable, predictable. It asks nothing from you except time, and in return, it gives you average. The other path is demanding, uncertain, unforgiving. It requires discipline, sacrifice, persistence. But in return, it gives you everything. And the difference between those who choose the second path and those who don't is not intelligence. It is not background. It is not luck. It is desire. Burning, unrelenting, unstoppable desire. The kind Napoleon Hill warned about. The kind most people never develop. And because they never develop it, they never transform. They never rise. They never become. But you are still here. still listening, still searching, which means something inside you is not satisfied with average. Something inside you wants more. And that is where it begins. There comes a moment, not loud, not dramatic, but dangerously quiet, a moment where your entire life stands still and asks you a question most people spend years avoiding. Do you truly want this? Or are you just entertaining the idea? Because everything changes the instant your answer becomes final. Napoleon Hill understood this moment. He lived it. Before the books, before the philosophy, before the world knew his name, he was just a young man. He was just a young man with questions, restless, curious, hungry for something more. And that hunger led him to a meeting that would alter the course of his life forever. A meeting with Andrew Carnegie, a man who had built unimaginable wealth from nothing but vision, steel, and an unbreakable will. Carnegie didn't just see a young journalist, he saw potential. And in that moment, he gave Napoleon Hill a challenge, not a job, not an opportunity, a mission. To dedicate his life to studying the most successful individuals in the world, to uncover the hidden laws of achievement, to decode the mindset of wealth. But here's what most people miss. Carnegie didn't give him time to think. He didn't say, take a few days. He didn't say, weigh your options. He gave him seconds. And Hill knew this was the moment, the line, the decision that would either define his life or leave him forgotten. And without certainty, without guarantees, without knowing how it would unfold, he said yes. That yes was not casual. It was not safe. It was not logical. It was desire, taking control. And from that moment forward, Hill was no longer drifting. He was directed, driven, consumed by a purpose larger than himself. And that is the exact moment most people never reach, because they hesitate. They overthink, they delay, they wait for clarity, when clarity only comes through action. Understand this. Indecision is the silent killer of destiny. It doesn't destroy you instantly. It slowly erodes your confidence. It weakens your belief. It trains your mind to avoid commitment. And over time, you become someone who starts but never finishes, dreams but never executes, wants but never becomes. Napoleon Hill observed this pattern repeatedly. He saw brilliant minds fail. He saw average individuals rise. And the difference was never intelligence. It was decision, speed of decision, definiteness of decision, irreversibility of decision. Because once a decision becomes final, the mind shifts. It stops searching for excuses and starts searching for solutions, fearing failure and starts using it. It stops negotiating with comfort and starts embracing growth. But here's where the deeper battle begins. Because the moment you decide, the moment you commit, the moment you declare that you will rise, something awakens. Fear. Not the loud kind, not the obvious kind, but the subtle psychological resistance that creeps in quietly. It questions you, tests you, whispers things that sound reasonable. Are you sure this is realistic? What if you fail? What will people think? What if you lose everything? And if your desire is not strong enough, you will listen, you will slow down, you will retreat. Because fear is not meant to be destroyed, it is meant to be transcended. Napoleon Hill didn't teach the absence of fear. He taught the dominance of faith over fear. A conscious decision to believe in your vision more than you believe in your doubts. And this is where most people break. Because belief is not automatic. It must be built, conditioned, reinforced, daily, through repetition, through visualization, through emotional conviction. Because the subconscious mind does not understand logic, it understands feeling. And if your feelings are dominated by fear, your results will reflect limitation. But if your feelings are dominated by certainty, your reality begins to shift. This is autosuggestion at its highest level. Not just repeating words, but embodying them, feeling them, living them, until they become your truth. Napoleon Hill practiced this relentlessly. He would write his goals, speak them, visualize them, feel them as already achieved, and over time, his identity changed. Because that's the real secret most people miss. You don't achieve wealth until you become the person capable of creating it. And becoming that person requires transformation. Not external, but internal. It requires you to let go of who you were, so you can rise into who you must become. And that process is uncomfortable, because your old identity will fight to survive. It will pull you back into habits, into doubts, into patterns that feel familiar, but keep you small. And this is where persistence becomes everything. Napoleon Hill called persistence the sustained effort necessary to induce faith. Read that again. Persistence creates belief, not the other way around. Most people wait to feel confident before they act. But the truth is, confidence is the result of action. Faith is the result of repetition. Belief is the result of persistence. And without persistence, desire fades. Dreams collapse. Potential dies quietly. This is why most people never achieve wealth. Not because they don't start, but because they stop. Too early, too soon, too often. They encounter resistance and interpret it as failure. They face obstacles and assume it's a sign to quit. They experience delay and lose faith in the vision. But Napoleon Hill discovered something powerful. Every adversity carries within it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Every setback is a setup. Every failure is feedback, but only for those who persist long enough to see it. Because the path to wealth is not straight. It is unpredictable. It is challenging. It is filled with moments where nothing seems to work, where progress feels invisible, where doubt tries to take control. And in those moments, only one thing determines your outcome: your decision to continue, to push forward, to stay committed, even when results are delayed. This is the test. The invisible test that separates those who dream from those who achieve, because anyone can start when motivation is high. Anyone can act when things feel easy, but very few can persist when everything feels uncertain. And that is where wealth is created, not in comfort, not in ease, but in resistance, in discipline, in relentless forward movement. Napoleon Hill saw this again and again. Men who were on the verge of breakthrough quit because they mistook temporary defeat for permanent failure. They didn't realize they were one step away, one decision away, one moment of persistence away from everything changing. And this is happening right now to millions of people. They are close, closer than they think, but they stop, they doubt, they walk away, and they never know how close they truly were. But you're still here, still listening, still absorbing, which means you haven't quit, not yet. And that matters. Because the moment you decide to go all in, to eliminate retreat, to remove doubt as an option, everything begins to shift. Your energy changes, your focus sharpens, your actions become intentional, and your results start aligning with your mindset. Because wealth is not random, it is a reflection of your beliefs, your habits, your persistence, your desire. And when those align, nothing can stop you, not circumstance, not failure, not time, because you are no longer dependent on external conditions. You are driven by internal certainty. And that is unstoppable. A silent dimension where every decision is born, every action is shaped, every result is predetermined, the subconscious mind. Napoleon Hill called it the gateway between thought and reality. And most people live their entire lives without ever learning how to use it. They think consciously, but they are programmed subconsciously. They choose with logic, but they act through conditioning. They desire success, but they are wired for limitation. And so they remain trapped, not by circumstance, but by invisible patterns. Because here is the truth: Your subconscious mind is always working, always listening, always recording, always responding. It does not sleep. It does not question. It does not judge. It simply accepts and executes. And whatever you feed it, it multiplies. If you feed it fear, it creates hesitation. If you feed it doubt, it creates indecision. If you feed it limitation, it creates barriers. But if you feed it certainty, it creates power. This is where the real game begins. Because wealth is not created by effort alone, it is created by alignment. When your conscious desires and your subconscious beliefs move in the same direction, that is when things accelerate. That is when opportunities appear. That is when intuition sharpens. That is when reality begins to respond. But most people are out of alignment. They say they want wealth, but deep inside, they say they want success, but subconsciously, they fear responsibility. They say they want freedom. But internally, they are addicted to comfort. And this contradiction creates resistance, internal conflict, self-sabotage. Napoleon Hill discovered that the subconscious mind can be influenced through repetition and emotion, not logic, not force, but feeling, which means you cannot casually think your way into wealth. You must feel your way into it. You must impress your subconscious mind with images, with belief, with certainty so strong that it has no choice but to accept it as reality. This is why visualization is not optional. It is essential, because the mind cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. So when you see your success clearly, when you feel it deeply, when you repeat it daily, you begin to reprogram your identity. And once identity shifts, everything else follows. Because you don't rise to your goals, you fall to your identity. And if your identity is small, your results will always shrink to match it. But when your identity expands, your standards rise, your habits evolve, your decisions sharpen, and suddenly you are no longer chasing wealth, you are becoming it. Napoleon Hill understood this transformation intimately. He wasn't born wealthy, he wasn't given shortcuts. He built himself from the inside out through discipline of thought, through clarity of purpose, through relentless repetition of belief, and over time his mind became conditioned, focused, aligned, powerful. But there was another force, a force even more powerful than the subconscious mind alone, a force that amplifies thought, accelerates growth, multiplies results. The mastermind. Napoleon Hill described it as the coordination of knowledge and effort between two or more people who work toward a definite purpose in a spirit of harmony. But this is not just collaboration, it is multiplication. Because when minds unite, energy shifts, ideas expand, creativity explodes, and something extraordinary happens. A third mind emerges, a higher intelligence, a collective consciousness that no single individual can access alone. This is why the most successful individuals never operate in isolation. They build alliances, they surround themselves with thinkers, visionaries, doers, people who challenge them, elevate them, expand their perspective, because isolation limits growth, but connection accelerates it. And yet, most people avoid this. They stay in environments that keep them comfortable. They surround themselves with mediocrity. They fear being challenged. They resist being pushed. And as a result, they stagnate. Because your environment is shaping you every second. Every conversation, every influence, every interaction is either feeding your growth or reinforcing your limitation. And if you are not intentional, you will drift into average. Napoleon Hill warned about this. He emphasized association. Because success is not just a personal journey, it is a collective force. And when you align yourself with the right minds, with the right energy, with the right vision, your trajectory changes faster than you think. But there is a price. There is always a price. Because growth demands sacrifice. It demands that you outgrow people, outgrow habits, outgrow comfort zones, and that is painful because the familiar feels safe. Even when it's limiting, even when it's holding you back, even when it's keeping you from becoming who you are meant to be. But if you truly desire wealth, you must be willing to let go, to release everything that does not align with your future, because you cannot carry your old life into your new identity. It won't fit. It won't work. It will slow you down. And this is where most people hesitate. They want growth without loss. They want success without discomfort. They want transformation without change. But that is impossible because transformation requires destruction. The destruction of old beliefs, old patterns, old identities. And until you are willing to let those go, you will remain stuck. But the moment you release, the moment you surrender the old version of yourself, something powerful happens. You create space, space for new ideas, new habits, new standards, new identity. And in that space, wealth begins to grow, because wealth is not just accumulation, it is evolution. And evolution requires courage. The courage to think differently, the courage to act differently, the courage to believe differently, even when no one else understands, even when results are not visible, even when doubt tries to creep back in, because it will. Doubt never fully disappears. It returns, it tests, it challenges. But now you are different. Now you are aware. Now you have control. And instead of being controlled by doubt, you observe it, you override it, you replace it with belief, with certainty, with desire so strong that nothing can shake it. This is mastery, not perfection, but control. Control over your thoughts, control over your emotions, control over your direction. And when you achieve that, wealth is no longer a question. It becomes inevitable. Not because of luck, not because of timing, but because of alignment, because everything within you is moving toward it. And when that happens, the external world has no choice but to follow. There is a breaking point, a moment so intense, so internal, so irreversible, that the person you once were cannot survive it, not physically, but psychologically, because at a certain level of awareness, at a certain depth of desire, at a certain point of no return, you don't improve yourself anymore. You outgrow yourself. This is the identity rebirth Napoleon Hill hinted at, but most people never experience because they never go deep enough. They never push far enough. They never commit hard enough to force the transformation. They stay in the safe zone of trying to be disciplined, trying to stay focused, trying to believe. But trying is still negotiating. Trying still leaves room for escape. And as long as escape exists, transformation cannot happen, because transformation demands finality, a decision so absolute that retreat becomes impossible. Napoleon Hill observed that the highest achievers did not leave themselves a way back. They burned the bridge, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. They reached a point where failure was no longer an option, not because they were guaranteed success, but because they removed the possibility of quitting. And that changes everything. Because when quitting is no longer available, the mind becomes dangerous, creative, relentless. It stops asking if, and starts solving how. This is the moment desire evolves into destiny, not a dream, not a hope, but a command, an internal order that your entire being begins to follow. And when that happens, fear loses its authority, not because it disappears, but because it no longer controls you. Napoleon Hill spoke of 6 basic fears: fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love, fear of old age, fear of death. These fears silently govern most lives. They shape decisions, limit actions, destroy ambition. But here is the truth. Fear only has power when your desire is weak, when your vision is unclear, when your identity is unstable, But when desire becomes burning, when purpose becomes definite, when identity becomes aligned, fear becomes irrelevant. Because now you are no longer reacting to life, you are directing it. And that is where legends are created, not in comfort, not in ease, but in absolute internal certainty. Napoleon Hill didn't just study success, he became it through years of persistence, through rejection, through struggle, through moments where everything seemed uncertain. But he didn't stop, he didn't retreat, he didn't negotiate. He stayed aligned with his purpose. And eventually, the world aligned with him, because reality responds to consistency, to clarity, to conviction. And when those are sustained long enough, results become inevitable. But understand this clearly, this level of certainty is not built overnight. It is forged through repetition, through discipline, through daily reinforcement of belief, because every day you are either strengthening your new identity or slipping back into your old one. There is no neutral, there is no pause, there is only progress or regression. And this is where most people lose, not in big moments, but in small ones. The moments where discipline is optional, the moments where effort is inconvenient, the moments where no one is watching. Because success is not built in intensity, it is built in consistency. And consistency is driven by identity. When you become someone who does not break promises to themselves, who does not negotiate with distraction, who does not tolerate weakness, everything changes. Your standards rise, your habits sharpen, your results accelerate, and suddenly you are no longer chasing success, you are operating from it. Napoleon Hill called this the state of faith, not blind belief, but conditioned certainty. A mental state where doubt cannot survive, where fear cannot dominate, where vision becomes reality, because it is held with such intensity that the subconscious mind accepts it as truth. And once the subconscious accepts it, it begins to work silently, powerfully, relentlessly. It influences your actions, your decisions, your awareness. It guides you toward opportunities, toward connections, toward ideas that align with your purpose. And from the outside, it looks like luck, but it's not. It's alignment. It's the result of internal order. Because when your mind is clear, your actions are precise. And when your actions are precise, your results compound. This is the wealth mindset. Not just thinking rich, but operating rich, deciding rich, acting rich, acting rich before the money ever appears, because money is not the starting point, it is the outcome, the byproduct of who you become. And if you try to chase it without becoming the person capable of holding it, you will lose it again and again. This is why most people, even when they taste success, cannot sustain it, because their identity never changed. Their desire was temporary, their belief was unstable, their mindset was untrained, and so they fall back to what is familiar, to what is comfortable, to what matches their internal state. But you are no longer that person. You are no longer drifting. You are no longer uncertain. You are no longer waiting, because something has shifted, something deeper than motivation, something stronger than emotion, a decision, a final decision to rise, to transform, to become. And once that decision is made, everything else follows. Because the path is no longer optional, it is inevitable, and now you stand at the edge, not of the world, but of yourself. Everything you've heard, everything you've felt, everything that has been building inside you leads to this moment, because this was never just about wealth. It was never just about money. It was never just about success. It was about awakening the force within you that most people go their entire lives without ever touching. Napoleon Hill didn't write about wealth. He revealed a law so powerful that once understood, it makes mediocrity impossible. And that law is this: you become what you demand of yourself, not what you wish, not what you hope, not what you occasionally try, but what you demand, with intensity, with clarity, with absolute certainty, because life does not give you what you want, it gives you what you are aligned with. And alignment is created through desire, burning desire, the kind that doesn't fade, the kind that doesn't negotiate, the kind that doesn't ask for permission, the kind that rewires your entire existence. And now the truth becomes unavoidable. Most people never achieve wealth because they never reach this level. They stay in comfort. They stay in hesitation. They stay in the illusion that someday things will change. But someday is the most dangerous word ever created, because someday is where dreams go to die, slowly, without resistance. And if you are not careful, someday will take everything from you, your potential, your time, your life, but not today, because today you see clearly. Today you understand. Today you realize that the missing piece was never opportunity. It was never resources. It was never timing. It was you, your level of decision, your level of commitment, your level of desire. And now that you see it, you cannot unsee it. You cannot go back. Because awareness changes everything. Napoleon Hill spent his life trying to wake people up to this truth. Most ignored it, some doubted it, a few applied it, and those few changed everything. They built empires, created wealth, transformed industries, not because they were chosen, but because they chose. They chose to think differently, to act differently, to believe differently, to demand more from themselves than anyone else ever did. And that is what separates the extraordinary from the average. Not talent, not luck, not background, but standards. The standards you set, the standards you enforce, the standards you refuse to lower no matter what. Because once your standards rise, your life must follow. There is no other outcome. And now the question is no longer theoretical. It is personal. What do you demand from yourself? Not tomorrow, not next week, now. In this moment, do you demand growth or accept comfort? Do you demand discipline or tolerate distraction? Do you demand greatness or settle for average? Because whatever you choose will define everything that follows. This is the moment Napoleon Hill spoke about, the moment where thought becomes decision. Decision becomes action. Action becomes identity. And identity becomes destiny. And once that chain is activated, there is no stopping it. Because destiny is not something that happens to you. It is something you create through repetition, through belief, through relentless forward movement. And yes, there will be resistance. There will be doubt. There will be moments where everything inside you tries to pull you back. But now you know. Now you see. Now you understand that those moments are not signs to stop. They are tests. Tests of your desire. Tests of your commitment. Tests of your identity. And every time you push through, you become stronger, sharper, closer, until one day the struggle shifts, the resistance fades, the vision materializes, and what once felt impossible becomes your reality, not by chance, but by design, because you built it, thought by thought, action by action, decision by decision. This is the power Napoleon Hill tried to awaken. The realization that you are not limited by your past, by your circumstances, by your environment. You are only limited by the level of desire you are willing to sustain. And if that desire becomes absolute, there is nothing you cannot create, nothing you cannot achieve, nothing you cannot become, but only if you decide fully, finally, without hesitation, without retreat, without doubt. Because the moment you do, everything changes. Your mind locks in, your focus sharpens, your actions align, and your reality begins to shift in ways you cannot yet imagine. This is not motivation. This is transformation. This is not inspiration. This is activation. This is the moment where you stop listening and start becoming. Because the truth is simple, brutally simple. You already have everything you need. The intelligence, the potential, the ability. The only question is whether you have the desire, the real desire, the burning desire, The kind that Napoleon Hill warned about, the kind most people never develop, the kind that changes everything. And now, there is only one thing left, one final step, one final decision, not spoken, not written, but made deep within you right now. Will you continue living as you have, or will you rise into who you are meant to be? Will you drift, or will you decide? Will you wait, or will you act? Because this moment, this exact moment, will never come again, and what you do with it will echo for the rest of your life. So decide, right now, not later, not someday, now. Decide that you will no longer accept average. Decide that you will no longer tolerate limitation. Decide that you will no longer negotiate with your potential. Decide that you will rise, that you will persist, that you will become unstoppable. Because once that decision is made, there is no force strong enough to stop you. Not fear, not failure, not time. Because you are no longer hoping for success, you are commanding it. And when you command it with clarity, with faith, with burning desire, the universe has no choice but to respond.